I never meant to steal his son, I only meant to save him. But 6 months later, the most feared Mafia king in Italy found me, and now I'm locked inside his empire, with the baby I took and the man I shouldn't want. This isn't just a story, this is a confession, and you're about to hear every breath of it. Let him tell you how he felt before I tell you my side of the story.
I've heard people say grief is a dull ache. They're liars. Mine was sharp, bloody. A blade turned inward and twisted until it carved out every part of me that had ever felt hope. And then, just when the silence of death settled in, it took more. My name is Andrea Marcarelli. I am 34 years old, and 6 months ago, I held my wife's lifeless hand while she bled out on the delivery table. I felt her fingers go cold. I kissed her knuckles and told her I was sorry, even though it was too late. And my son was stolen before I ever held him. No ransom, no trace, not even a whisper from the monsters who took him. I burned half of Naples in the weeks that followed. Allies turned into ash. Enemies vanished without bones. My empire, the one I inherited through decades of blood, became a hunting ground. My consigliere said I was unraveling. He was right, because without her, without the child we made, there was no reason to hold the crown. Dadora, I muttered through gritted teeth the night she died, hands soaked in her blood. Fix her. But he couldn't. No one could. Even now, 6 months later, the smell of that room haunts me. Antiseptic, iron, roses wilting in a vase by the window. I left them there. Told the hospital to keep the room locked and untouched. I wanted it to rot, just like the part of me that died inside it. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. Thunder growled over the hills, a warning of another storm coming. The estate was dark, except for the warm glow of my study, the only place I still existed like a man and not a ghost. I sat at the desk, staring at the file I'd already memorized 100 times. Security footage, timelines, staff records, disappearances, dead ends. Every detail led nowhere, until tonight. The door creaked open. Luca stepped in, slow and hesitant. He never hesitated. Not around me. Not unless... What? My voice came out hoarse, more growl than word. He closed the door behind him and set a folder on the desk. Fresh, still warm from the printer. I think we found her. The words didn't land at first. They hovered in the air like smoke, choking out the silence. My pulse didn't race. My breath didn't catch. I just stared. Then I opened it. Photo 1. A woman. Blonde hair tucked under a baseball cap. Dark glasses. A worn blue hoodie. Carrying a baby. Photo 2. Same woman. No glasses. Her face clearer. Freckles. American features. Cautious, but not paranoid. She looked maternal, not like a threat. She's been living in Calabria under the name Elise Carter, Luca said quietly. No official records before 6 months ago, no passport, no bank accounts, but she had help. Someone faked the documents. I flipped to the next page. The baby, sleeping in a stroller. Same bone structure, dark hair, just like me. Dimple on the left cheek, about 6 months old. I stared at him until my vision blurred. DNA? I rasped. Not yet, but Andrea. Luca hesitated, then whispered, It's him. I'd bet my life. I didn't speak. I couldn't, because something twisted in my chest, a soundless scream that had been buried for 6 goddamn months. Alive. My son is alive. I moved like a machine. Call the team. Clear the airstrip. Prepare the jet. Wake the pilot. We were in the air within the hour. The flight was quiet. My mind wasn't. I tried to imagine what I would say to her. This woman who took my child from his blood, who watched me spiral through grief while hiding the only piece of my wife I had left. But the truth was, I didn't know if I would speak at all. I didn't trust myself, because rage like mine didn't simmer. It exploded. We landed just after midnight. Her safe house, if you could call it that, was tucked behind a bakery in a fishing village so quiet it could have been a ghost town. Luca's men had eyes on her all day. She hadn't run. She hadn't even noticed. Rookie mistake. I didn't knock when I entered. The front door shattered inward under my boot. She screamed. I followed the sound to the back room. Small, warm, lit only by a salt lamp glowing orange beside a crib. She stood between me and the child, hands raised, eyes wide. Don't, please. He's just a baby. Her voice cut through me like a blade. High, breathless, protective, like she cared. I stalked forward. My men flanked the room, weapons ready but unnecessary. You stole from me. She didn't deny it, didn't beg, just trembled. Let me explain, she whispered. No. My voice was ice. You don't speak until I tell you to. I moved past her, looked down into the crib. The child blinked up at me, unfazed. His eyes were dark, just like mine. just like hers. He reached out, tiny fingers brushing mine, and for the first time in 6 months, I breathed. Behind me, she sobbed softly. I turned. She flinched when our eyes met. "You took my son," I said. "I saved him." Silence stretched between us, crackling with 1,000 unsaid things. But I didn't ask what she meant. Not yet. Instead, I said the one thing I hadn't planned. The one thing I never thought I'd say. "She stays." Lucas stiffened. "Boss?" "She stays," I repeated, stepping between her and the door. "And if anyone touches her, they answer to me. Because I needed answers. Because I needed to know why she risked everything to steal the heir to the Marcarelli empire. But more than that, I needed to know why." Looking into her eyes didn't feel like hate. It felt like fate.
So now you know what he was thinking. Let me tell you what really happened. Let's begin. I didn't plan to steal a baby. I didn't wake up that night thinking I'd commit a federal crime, betray a mafia family, and go on the run with a child who wasn't mine. But when I looked into that newborn's face, purple and screaming, tiny chest heaving with the effort to survive, and saw the machine's flat line behind his mother's lifeless body, I knew. If I left him there, he'd be next. So I ran, and I never looked back. I changed my name before I left Naples, bought forged papers, used burner phones and hidden cash from a desperate favor I never planned to cash in. I dyed my hair, deleted my past, told the world I was Elise Carter, single mother, widow, quiet, invisible. But I still checked the news every night, read between the headlines, tracked the Marcarelli body count like it was a weather report. Andrea had scorched the earth. And every time I saw a new name listed under the presumed dead column, I whispered an apology to the baby sleeping beside me. "I'm sorry your father's a monster," I'd say. "But I had to save you from becoming one, too." I didn't hear them enter. 1 second, I was spooning applesauce into Marco's mouth. Yes, I named him. I gave him a name. The next, my front door exploded inward like a bomb had gone off, shouting. Boots. Guns. Black-clad men filling my tiny safe house like shadows pouring into every corner. I froze. My breath caught. Marco whimpered in his high chair, and then he screamed. I ran to him without thinking, grabbing him into my arms, shielding his body with mine as the men closed in. I ran and put him in his crib. "Please," I gasped. "He's just a baby, don't." That's when I saw him. Andrea, alive, taller than I remembered, broader, terrifying. He looked like grief carved into a man's body. Hollow-eyed, silent, jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles ripple. He didn't shout, he didn't threaten, he just looked at me. And I swear, I stopped breathing. He walked past me without a word, right to the crib. Marco stared up at him like he'd always known, and Andrea reached out, touched his fingers, and everything in the room shifted. His men fell silent. I did too, because the air changed, like something dangerous had just found the only thing it couldn't live without. "You took my son," he said, voice low and lethal. I forced myself to meet his eyes. I saved him. That was the truth. It was the only truth I had. But it wasn't enough. He stared at me like he was deciding which bone to break first. Then he turned to his men. "She stays." What? No. You can't. You don't get to keep me here." Andrea turned slowly, one brow lifting. "I don't?" His tone was soft, mocking, cold. "You're not God," I snapped. His gaze dropped to the baby. "No, but I am his father, and that makes me something worse." They took me that night, not in chains, not in cuffs, but in silence. I lifted Marco in my arms and held him close to my chest. One of the guards reached out to take the baby. I flinched so hard my knees buckled. Andrea's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Don't touch her." His man froze. I couldn't believe it. But he didn't argue. He stepped back. Andrea looked at me, his voice steady and low. "You hold him. You ride with me." Why? So I wouldn't run? Or because he knew I'd claw someone's eyes out before letting Marco go? Either way, I didn't speak again until we reached the estate. The drive was endless. My heart never slowed. I sat stiff in the leather seat, clutching Marco while Andrea sat beside me in still, simmering silence. I kept my head turned to the window, but I felt his eyes on me the whole time. Not just watching, studying, like he was trying to read the motive behind every breath I took. "Why?" he finally asked, voice like steel. I didn't answer, because the truth wasn't simple. Because the truth could still get me killed. So I stared out into the dark and said nothing. The gates of the Marcarelli compound opened like the jaws of a beast. Lights, walls, guards everywhere. We drove through layers of security thicker than any fortress, and when we stopped in front of the main house, palatial, old, beautiful in a dangerous way, Andrea opened the door and motioned for me to follow. Still holding Marco, I stepped out. He didn't touch me, didn't threaten, just walked ahead expecting me to follow. I did. What choice did I have? Inside, the estate was warmer than I expected. Gold-trimmed walls, marble floors, crystal chandeliers glittering like ice, and silence. So much silence. He led me up a curved staircase and down a long hall, opened a door at the end. The room was soft, rich, cream sheets, mahogany crib already waiting. It looked maternal. My chest ached. "You knew I was coming," I said quietly. "I hoped." He turned to me, slow and deliberate, his eyes locked on mine. "Put him down," he said. My arms tightened instinctively. He didn't repeat the command. He just stepped forward, so close I could smell the storm on his coat, and looked down at the child in my arms. "I won't hurt him," he said. "You know that." I did. God help me. I did. So I crossed the room and laid Marco gently in the crib. He sighed in his sleep, fingers curling like he was dreaming. I turned, and Andrea was still watching me, still quiet, still dangerous, and I was still standing. "What happens now?" I asked, his head tilted slightly. "Now?" He stepped forward, gaze searing through me. "Now you tell me everything." I swallowed hard and whispered, then closed the door. Because if I was going to tell him how his wife died, how the baby was meant to follow, how the order came from inside his empire, then I was going to need a locked room and the devil himself to listen. I knew the second the door closed behind us that I wasn't walking out of that room unchanged. He didn't speak. Not right away. Just stood there watching me like he expected my confession to burn. And maybe it would. I kept my back to the door, one hand still resting on the crib's edge. Even though Marco was sound asleep, I needed the anchor. Something soft. Innocent. Real. Because Andrea Marcarelli wasn't real. He was a myth made of bone and blood, sharpened by loss and crowned in fear. And now, he was mine to answer to. "I was working the night she died," I began, voice quiet. "I was the night shift NICU nurse. They called me down because she was crashing." His face didn't move. Not a twitch, not even a blink. She was bleeding too fast. I asked why there was no OB, no attending, no surgical team. They said she came in private, quiet, that her husband handled everything. His jaw flexed. I kept going. She was terrified, barely conscious. She kept whispering one thing over and over. I looked up, my throat closing around the memory. "Don't let them take him." Andrea's breath caught, just once, but it was enough. "She knew," I said softly. "She knew someone was coming for him. She must have suspected before that night, but by the time she was dying, she was sure." "She didn't tell me," he said, voice raw. "Not once." "She couldn't. Someone made sure she was alone, someone who wanted the baby to be born without witnesses, who didn't plan on either of them surviving." I didn't have to say it outright. He wasn't stupid. He saw the holes in his empire, the cracks only visible from the inside. And now, they were swallowing him whole. "They wanted the baby dead?" he asked, voice like a blade pressed to skin. I nodded. "And you?" "I wasn't supposed to be there," I whispered. But I was, and when they pronounced her dead and the baby started coding, I acted. I took him straight to NICU, hid him under another name. They told me to list him as deceased. I didn't. "You forged records," he said. "I lied," I replied. "I ran." Finally he moved, slow steps toward me, predator silent, rage simmering beneath every inch of him. "And you never thought to tell me?" "You were breaking the city in half," I snapped. "Your men killed 3 doctors and a midwife in the first month. You weren't asking questions, Andrea. You were hunting." He stopped inches away, close enough for me to feel the heat of him. "I deserved to know," he said. "I know." "You took my son. I saved him." "Wait. Before I say what happened next, are you the type to run or the type to stay? 'Cause I thought I would run. Now, let's get back to my mistake." His hand hit the wall beside my head, not touching me, but close enough. I didn't flinch. Not this time. "I should kill you," he said, low and vicious. "Every part of me says to end you right here." I lifted my chin. "Then do it." Silence. His chest rose once, twice. His eyes never left mine. Then his voice changed, rougher, quieter. "I held her hand while she died. She never got to name him." My throat ached. "I did," I whispered. "I gave him one." He looked at me like I just ripped his soul in two. "What?" "Marco." His eyes shut, just for a second. Then he opened them, and they were full of something I hadn't seen before. Grief, gratitude, fury, love. Not for me, for the child who bore his name without ever knowing it came from blood. "I want him protected," he said, stepping back. "Locked compound, armed guards, round-the-clock surveillance. He's a baby, not a weapon." "No," Andrea murmured, "he's both." My spine stiffened. "Then you're no better than the ones who tried to kill him." He turned fast. "I'm worse." The way he said it, no hesitation, made the hair on my arms rise. But then he looked at me, something colder setting in behind his eyes. "You're not leaving." I froze. "What?" "You heard me. You said I could explain, not that you were keeping me." "I said you stay, and I meant it. You can't keep me here," I whispered, blood draining from my face. He walked toward me again, slow, deliberate, like a man claiming territory. "I can. I will. And if you try to leave, I will find you." "And then what?" I hissed. "You'll lock me in a tower? Chain me to a crib? I'll bury anyone who helps you." The words weren't a threat. They were a promise. I stepped back, breath shaky. "You're insane." "I'm a father," he said, "a real one. And that means my son doesn't grow up without his mother, or with a woman who thinks she can run when it gets hard." "You think this is easy for me?" I choked. "I gave up my life to protect him, and now you'll give it up again." He moved to the door, opened it, paused. "Clean clothes are in the closet. Don't try to leave. My men will shoot first and apologize later." Then he was gone. The door shut, and I stood in a gilded cage, holding onto a name that wasn't mine and a child who no longer belonged to me. I didn't cry, not then, but I curled into the corner that night and whispered to Marco in the dark, "I think I made a mistake. Because I didn't just walk into the lion's den, I stole his cub, and now the lion was watching me sleep." I woke to silence, no crying, no footsteps, just the eerie, unnatural kind of quiet that felt intentional, manufactured, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then I sat up and remembered everything. The compound, Andrea, his eyes when I said the name Marco, his voice when he told me I wasn't leaving. I blinked hard, trying to clear the fog in my head, but even the air felt thick in this room. Too soft, too clean. Like the kind of luxury that wanted to lull you into forgetting it was a prison. Marco stirred in the bassinet beside me, safe, fed, watched probably, because I knew better than to think I was alone. The clothes in the closet still had tags, designer labels I'd only seen in magazines, silk, wool, hand-stitched, everything. Nothing I'd ever put on my body in the real world. I chose a sweater, pulled on leggings, flat boots, dressed like someone who wanted to blend in. But here, that wasn't possible. This wasn't my world. This was his, and he wanted me to remember that. When I opened the door, there were 2 guards in the hall. Not thugs, suits, comms in their ears, weapons discreet but not hidden. One of them nodded toward the stairwell. "Don Marcorelli is waiting for you." Don, not Andrea. Right. I was in his house now. The dining room was something out of a royal estate. High ceilings, gold-framed art, fresh flowers that probably cost more than my car used to, and him at the head of the table in a dark button-down and a watch that probably belonged in a museum. He didn't look up when I entered. Just sipped his espresso, read a file, owned the world without needing to speak. Marco shifted on my hip, and that got his attention. His eyes lifted, landed on his son, and for a second, just a breath, something raw and unguarded passed through them. Then it was gone. "Sit." I did. But only because standing made me feel like I was about to bolt. The table had already been set for 2. Porridge, toast, coffee, fresh fruit, not a trap, not poisoned, but not comfort either. This wasn't kindness, it was a statement. He'd already decided we were staying. "I had a crib brought up," he said, still flipping pages in the folder. "Sound monitors installed. The guard rotation outside your door has doubled." I swallowed hard. "Because you think I'll run?" He finally looked at me. "No, because I know someone will come for you." My blood ran cold. "You think the same people who tried to kill Marco? We'll try again." He folded the file closed and pushed it aside. "And now they'll come through you." I stared at my plate, suddenly unable to eat. "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered. "Because the sooner you stop pretending you're a guest, the safer you'll be." He stood, rounded the table, and stopped behind me. Too close. My spine stiffened. His fingers brushed my shoulder, not possessive, but intentional. "You walked into my world when you took him," he said, low. "You don't walk out." I turned, eyes meeting his. I didn't take him to hurt you. No, he said softly. You took him to protect him. I see that now. He stepped closer, his voice darkened. But if you ever try to take him from me again, there won't be a room in this world you can hide in. He left me there. Not in chains, not in silence, but in something worse. His attention. The next 2 days blurred, guards everywhere, meals delivered. Marco never left my side, but I could feel the invisible threads tightening. Every hallway was watched, every movement recorded. And Andrea kept watching me. Not directly, but I felt him in the reflection of every window, in the way the house shifted when he entered, in the way the staff paused mid-step the second they heard his voice. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, he didn't have to. This place breathed for him. On the third morning, I tried to open a window. It was sealed, not painted shut. Sealed. A chill ran down my spine. The cage was beautiful, but it was still a cage. That night, I stepped out into the hallway with Marco and caught the last thing I ever expected to see. Andrea. Alone. In the nursery. He didn't notice me right away. His back was turned, his shoulders tense. He stood over the crib, our son already asleep, and just stared. No movement, no sound, just this quiet ache in his posture, like he was trying to memorize every detail in case it disappeared again. I didn't move. I should have. But then he spoke. Soft. Haunted. I never got to name him. I exhaled. He has one. He turned slowly. His expression was unreadable. You still call him that? Yes. A long pause stretched between us. Then, without taking his eyes off me, he said, Good. I waited for him to leave. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped toward me, closer than we'd been since that night, and let his gaze drag over my face like he was searching for something hidden beneath it. I don't trust you, he said. I know. But I don't hate you either. That surprised me more than it should have. You should. He smiled. It was cold, sharp, not kind. No, he said, stepping past me. Hate is simple, and nothing about you is simple. As he walked away, I stood frozen in the hall with Marco in my arms, because that wasn't just a threat or a warning. It was something far more dangerous. It was interest, and in a house like this, from a man like him, interest could burn the whole world down. The first shot shattered a window. Not a warning, not a test. A clean, precise crack followed by the scream of glass and the thunder of Marco's cry in my arms. I moved before I thought. My body reacted the way it always had in emergencies. Trained, ruthless, fast. I turned, shielding him with my chest, diving behind the heavy armchair as another shot tore through the wall where his crib had been seconds earlier. Marco, shh, shh, I whispered, heart slamming against my ribs. The alarms didn't sound right away. That told me everything. This wasn't an outside breach. This was inside. Protect the air. Andrea's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and absolute, carrying down the hall like a command that bent men to it. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, shouting, footsteps pounding marble. I curled around Marco, pressing his face into my neck, breathing him in, warm milk, soap, life, while the walls of the silk cage finally showed their teeth. A body hit the floor outside the door. Then another. Andrea appeared in the doorway, gun raised, eyes blazing as he scanned the room. When he saw us, something savage crossed his face. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and crouched in front of me, one hand gripping my shoulder, not rough, not gentle. Anchoring. Are you hit? I shook my head. Marco screamed. Andrea didn't flinch. He lifted his coat, wrapped it around Marco with hands that didn't tremble, then pressed his forehead briefly to his son's hair, just for a breath. Then the dawn was back. Move, he ordered. Now. They rushed us through back corridors I hadn't known existed, down narrow stairs, past reinforced doors that slammed shut behind us with the sound of finality. The safe room was cold steel and concrete, no windows, one table, cameras lining the ceiling. Andrea locked the door himself. Only then did the world slow. Marco hiccuped against my chest, his cries easing as I rocked him, murmuring nonsense through a throat tight with terror. Andrea stood across from us, gun still in hand, jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might crack. Who? He demanded. I swallowed. They weren't aiming at me. His eyes snapped to mine. They aimed for the crib, I continued, voice steady now, all the fear compressed into a hard, sharp line inside me. They knew where he'd be. Andrea's silence was deadly. You were wrong, I said quietly. It wasn't just a warning 6 months ago. This didn't start with me. He stepped closer. How? I met his gaze. Because your wife wasn't supposed to survive labor. The room went still. Andrea's breath left him in a slow, dangerous exhale. What did you just say? I told him everything. About the missing OB team. About the forged medication orders that thinned her blood. About the man who tried to sign the death certificate before the baby had even taken a breath. About the order buried in hospital administration files to list the infant as stillborn. I told him about the call I intercepted. Low voices, rushed Italian, talking about closing the bloodline. And I told him why I ran. Because if they could kill her in a private hospital wing, I said, they could kill him anywhere, including in your house. Andrea turned away from me, put both hands on the table. The gun clattered as he dropped it, and for the first time since I'd met him, I saw the man beneath the crown fracture. Not break. Fracture. I searched for traitors outside my walls, he said slowly. I never thought to look at the ones who stayed. I said nothing, because now he understood. The door opened. Luca stepped in, face grim. They were internal, he confirmed. 2 guards, 1 medic, all tied to the Santori family. We neutralized them. Andrea nodded once. Burn their houses, he said. Erase their names. Luca hesitated. Andrea, there's more. Andrea didn't turn. The Santoris believed the heir was cursed. They thought if the child lived, you'd go to war for him. Andrea finally faced us again. They were right. After the door closed, silence rushed back in. Andrea looked at Marco, sleeping now, exhausted by fear, and something shifted in his expression, something irreversible. You saved him, he said quietly. I nodded. And you saved me from becoming blind, he added. My throat tightened. I didn't mean to. Don't, he interrupted. You did what my empire failed to do. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, smell the gunpowder still clinging to his coat, hear the controlled violence in his breathing. I owe you, he said. I laughed weakly. You're holding me prisoner. No, his eyes locked onto mine. I'm keeping you alive. He reached out, not to me, but to Marco. His finger brushed his son's tiny hand. Marco curled around it instinctively. Andrea stilled, and for a heartbeat the dawn disappeared entirely. In his place stood a man who had almost lost everything. I will end this, he said, voice low and ironclad. For him. For her. He glanced at me. And for you. I stiffened. I didn't ask for that. I know. His hand withdrew. But you'll have it anyway. They moved us deeper into the compound that night. Thicker walls, more guards, no windows at all. Andrea watched the door seal behind us, then turned to me. You stay close to me from now on. Because I know too much? Because they'll come again, he said. And when they do, they'll try to take you before they try to take him. My heart skipped. You think I'm leverage. I think you're a target, he corrected, then quieter, and I won't lose either of you. Later, after Marco slept and the compound settled into uneasy quiet, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my hands. Andrea stood in the doorway, watching, not intruding. You should rest, he said. I will. He didn't move. Finally, I looked up at him. You believe me now? Yes. And what happens when this war ends? His gaze didn't waver. It won't, he said simply. But you won't be alone in it anymore. He closed the door behind him, leaving me with the truth echoing in my chest. I didn't just save his son. I lit the fuse to a war, and Andrea Marcarelli was done pretending he wasn't built to burn the world for the people he loved. They moved us before sunrise. No warning. 1 minute I was asleep beside Marco, and the next I woke to the sound of keys turning in the lock. The door creaked open, and Andrea's voice followed, low, clipped, cold. Get dressed. Bring the baby. I didn't argue, didn't ask where we were going, because something in his tone told me asking wouldn't change a damn thing. The new wing was deeper in the estate. Less marble, more steel, fewer windows, thicker walls. A place built to keep the outside world from ever reaching us again. Or maybe to keep us from leaving. The room was nicer somehow, warmer, still sterile in its perfection, but the crib had fresh blankets. The shelves had children's books. A rocking chair waited by the corner with a soft gray blanket folded over the back like someone had prepared it for me. But I hadn't asked for this. None of it. Why move us? I asked. Andrea leaned against the doorframe, sleeves rolled, tie undone like he hadn't slept. He probably hadn't. I don't trust the perimeter, I arched a brow. You trust this wing more than your own guards? I trust concrete, he replied, and I trust myself. I turned back toward the crib, brushing my fingers gently over Marco's head as he slept. He's okay. I know, His voice was closer now. I didn't turn. I know, I repeated, but I need to say it out loud. A pause, then quieter. So do I. I finally faced him. You said they'll try again. They will. And me? He held my gaze. They'll use you, or they'll destroy you. My heart stuttered. So you're locking me away? I'm protecting what's mine. Hey, before I tell you what he did next, are you still with me? Because this is where it stops being a story and starts being a trap. Now let's get back to my downfall. I stiffened. What do you mean? What's yours? He didn't flinch, Marco. And me? He stepped forward. You gave up everything to protect my son. You knew what taking him meant, what it would cost you. That doesn't mean I belong to you. I didn't say you belong to me. His voice dropped. I said you're mine. There's a difference. A terrifying one. Because Andrea didn't take ownership like a man. He claimed like a king. I didn't respond. Not with words, but something cracked inside me then. Something brittle I'd been clinging to like a raft. Distance. Safety. The illusion that I could stay here and not drown in him. I turned away, heart pounding, palms sweaty, heat crawling up my neck. He didn't follow. Just stood there watching me in silence until I said the one thing I shouldn't have. I used to dream about what his father would be like. The words slipped out like a confession. Soft. Barely audible. Andrea didn't speak. I kept going. I imagined kind eyes, a gentle voice, a man who would sing lullabies and cry at first steps. I looked at him. You're not that man. No, he said. I'm not. He stepped closer and closer until his voice brushed the shell of my ear. But I'm the man who'll make sure no one ever gets close enough to hurt him again. His hand came to rest on the crib rail. Marco stirred, tiny fingers flexing in sleep. Andrea's eyes dropped to him, then back to me. You did what no one else in my world could do, he said. You saved him. His voice dropped lower. And I will kill anyone who tries to take either of you from me again. He left before I could respond, and I hated how part of me wanted him to stay. That night, I found myself in the rocking chair, Marco curled against my chest, the soft creak of wood beneath us the only sound in the room. Andrea hadn't come back, not once. And still, I felt him in the walls, in the quiet, in the way the guards outside didn't look me in the eye when I passed, because something had shifted. And I didn't know if I'd survive the storm or become part of it. The next morning, a dress appeared in the wardrobe, soft gray silk, modest but elegant. It fit perfectly, which told me everything I needed to know. He hadn't just moved me. He was preparing something, claiming me louder. Lunch was waiting when I entered the garden, small, secluded, walled off by hedges high enough to block snipers. Andrea sat at the table already, reading something. He didn't look up as I approached, but his voice found me anyway. You wore it. I didn't want to insult the tailor, I said flatly. He looked up then, a ghost of something dangerous curling at the edge of his mouth. Liar. I sat. Carefully, he poured my tea. Like this was normal, like we hadn't been hunted 2 nights ago, like I wasn't still trying to figure out whether I was prisoner or something worse. I'm not sure what this is, I admitted quietly. He lifted his eyes. What? This. This. I gestured around. Us, the crib, the garden, silk dresses and breakfast like we're... I stopped myself. He didn't. Like we're a family? I looked away. He didn't press, didn't mock, just said the words that haunted me all night. You're safe here. For how long? As long as you stay. The words should have made me feel protected. They didn't. They made me feel owned. I miss my name, I whispered. He stilled. Elise Carter doesn't exist, but Erica Thomas does, and she hasn't been allowed to exist since I ran. His expression shifted, softer. I remember your voice, he said. That night, you were the only one who stayed calm. I blinked. What? When she crashed, his jaw tensed. When my wife died, I was shouting, cursing, threatening the whole damn hospital. But you didn't panic. He looked at me, something almost reverent in his gaze. You held her hand. You told her he'd be okay. I swallowed hard. You remember that? I remember everything. He leaned back, gaze heavy. And I never forgot you. My heart twisted. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream. But the truth? I didn't feel like a prisoner anymore. I felt like a match, and he was holding me too close to the flame. The rain started sometime after midnight, soft at first, then heavier, until it battered the windows with the kind of rhythm that makes you stop breathing just to hear it better. I couldn't sleep. Not with the weight of everything pressing down on me. The baby monitor whispered Marco's steady breathing from the nightstand beside me, the green light glowing soft and safe. My son was fine, but I wasn't. I slipped out of bed barefoot, pulled Andrea's oversized sweater tighter around me, and opened the bedroom door. The guards looked up, then stepped aside without a word. They didn't ask where I was going. They already knew. His office door was open. He sat behind the desk in a black shirt, sleeves rolled, collar undone. His tie hung from the edge of the lamp like he'd given up halfway through pretending to be civilized. There was whiskey in his glass, and grief in his eyes. He didn't flinch when he saw me. Didn't ask why I was there. He just nodded once as if he'd been waiting. "You still don't sleep," I said softly, stepping inside. He didn't smile, didn't lie. "I don't dream," he said. "So what's the point?" I walked to the bookshelves, slow, deliberate, not to look, just to breathe. I felt his eyes track me the whole way. "Does it ever stop hurting?" I whispered. No. The honesty cracked something in me, not because I didn't expect it, but because I did. "I used to think grief was something you survived," I said, "but I was wrong." He watched me. "It doesn't end," I continued. "It just finds new places to live inside you." His chair scraped quietly as he stood, and suddenly he was right behind me, close, but not touching. His voice brushed my neck. "Where does yours live?" I closed my eyes. In the moments I let myself hope. I turned to face him, and I shouldn't have, because the look in his eyes, possessive, tormented, hungry, wasn't the kind you walked away from. "You shouldn't look at me like that," I said. "I told you once," he murmured. "I don't hate you." "But you should. Maybe." His fingers brushed my cheek, and I didn't stop him. "I should be afraid of you," I breathed. "You are," he whispered back. And still I didn't move. The air between us fractured. Everything that had been building, grief, guilt, fury, obsession, it snapped. I reached for him at the same moment he pulled me in. His mouth crashed against mine, rough, unforgiving, desperate. It wasn't soft, it wasn't sweet. It was a collision, a demand. His hands cupped my face, slid into my hair, fisted like he didn't trust me to stay. My fingers clawed at his chest, gripping the fabric like I needed something to hold onto or I'd drown. He tasted like whiskey in winter and something darker, something his. When he backed me against the wall, I didn't flinch. When his hand found my waist and yanked me closer, I didn't stop him. And when he kissed me again, slower this time, but no less destructive, I opened to him, because I was already his. Maybe I always had been. I don't remember how we got to the couch, or when his shirt came undone, or when I stopped thinking. But I remember the way his hand cupped the back of my head, even as his mouth devoured mine. I remember the way his breath hitched when I said his name. I remember the sound he made when I kissed the scar just beneath his jaw. I remember the way he held me afterward. Like something fragile, like something wanted, like something he didn't know how to keep but couldn't let go of. We stayed like that for a long time, breathing, not speaking, until I finally whispered the truth into the silence between us. I never thought it would feel like this. His grip tightened around me. I never thought I'd feel again. I buried my face in his chest, because there was nothing else to do, because I couldn't take the way he was looking at me. Like I wasn't the nurse who ran, or the woman who stole his son, but the one who stayed. Eventually he moved, shifted just enough to look down at me. His voice was rough, unsteady. "I want to hate you for what you did. I know, but every time I look at him," he swallowed, "every time I look at you." I lifted my eyes. "I don't," he said, and the words broke something open inside me, because they weren't a promise or an apology, but they were real. "I don't know what this is," I admitted, voice low, "or what it's supposed to be. I don't either. But I know I can't survive losing him." He cupped my face again. "You won't." My chest ached. "And you." He didn't hesitate. "If I lost either of you, I wouldn't survive it." We didn't sleep that night. We stayed wrapped around each other in the dark, breathing the same air, sharing the same silence. And when the sun finally rose, neither of us were the same. We had crossed a line. There was no going back now. I should have known the quiet wouldn't last. You don't lie with a man like Andrea Marcarelli and expect peace to follow. You expect fire, war, consequences. And by the third morning after he touched me like I wasn't his prisoner, I got exactly that. It started with a phone call. I heard it from the nursery. his voice slicing through the silence of the hall, sharp and foreign in a language I didn't speak, though I recognized the tone. Russian. Whatever was said, it made him curse under his breath. Then silence. Then the sound of glass shattering. By the time I stepped into the doorway, he was already moving, suit jacket slung over his shoulder, gun holstered, phone abandoned on the table. His eyes landed on me like a strike. They made it official. My stomach tightened. What did? They've put a price on his head. His voice was quiet, calm, deadly. Who? The Vescari, he said. They've allied with what's left of the Santori. I blinked. But that means it's not about control anymore. He looked toward Marco's crib. It's about extinction. Before I tell you what he did next, this is your warning. After this, nothing stays innocent. Now, let's get back to the moment it broke. It happened faster than I could process. Andrea ordered every external gate shut, called in men I hadn't seen before, ruthless, silent, tattooed with the kind of ink that only meant one thing. Death wasn't a consequence for them. It was a language. The house transformed overnight, not into a home, but a stronghold. The nursery was fortified, bomb-proofed. Bulletproof glass sealed the windows. A panic room was built into the walls, disguised behind a panel I wouldn't have noticed if he hadn't shown me. You lock him in here, Andrea said, voice low, pointing to the hidden compartment, and you don't come out until I find you. And what about you? I whispered. He didn't answer. Just brushed his knuckles down my jaw and walked out the door. The first hit came that night. A car bomb outside the eastern gate. No casualties. Just a message. They weren't looking to wound. They were promising war. Andrea didn't flinch. He met with his top lieutenants in the dining hall, maps and floor plans spread across the antique table like a general before battle. I watched from the corner, unseen, uninvited, until he looked up and said, "She stays." Someone, an older man with gray at his temples, cleared his throat. "Boss, with respect, she's not." "She stays?" Andrea repeated, colder this time. No one questioned him again. I didn't speak, just listened. To names I didn't know, territories I didn't recognize, plans that involved bloodshed like it was currency. And all of it, for the child asleep upstairs with one tiny fist curled against his cheek. "I didn't ask for this," I whispered that night. Andrea didn't look up from the papers he was signing. "You gave him a name," he said. "You gave him life. That means you're in it now." "And you?" He did look at me then. Slow, sharp. I was born in it. Later, when he finally lay beside me, his hand found my waist beneath the sheets, pulling me into the kind of silence that doesn't need words. I should have pulled away, but I didn't, because I knew what he was doing, holding me like an anchor, like the storm he was about to walk into would drag him under if he didn't. And God help me, I held him right back. The attack came just before dawn. Gunfire outside the west wall, then the screech of metal tearing, the house flooded with movement, guards shouting, radios crackling, Marco's cry echoing through the monitor. I ran to him, heart in my throat. He was safe. Shaking, confused, but safe. I held him until Andrea burst through the door, gun still in hand, breathing hard. "You're okay?" he demanded. I nodded. Yes. He crossed the room in 2 strides, pressed his forehead to Marco's and whispered something I didn't understand. Then turned to me. "I need you downstairs." My stomach dropped. Why? "Because I want them to see you." I didn't ask who. I didn't have to. The man was dragged in, bloody, bruised, snarling in Italian tar I only half understood. "Vescari," someone said. Andrea stood before him, calm, composed, a king delivering judgment. "She risked her life to save my heir," Andrea said, nodding to me, "and you aimed a gun at her door." The man spat blood. "She's no one." "No," Andrea said quietly, "she's mine." He raised the gun. I flinched, but Andrea didn't pull the trigger. He handed the weapon to me. My hands shook as I took it. "What? What are you doing?" I whispered. "You decide," he said. "You saved my son. You have the right to end the man who tried to take him." The man laughed, coughed blood. "You don't have it in you," he sneered. He was right. I didn't, but Andrea stepped close, his hand covering mine around the grip. "You don't have to," he murmured. "But you do need to see what happens to those who try." He pulled the trigger. I didn't even flinch. Later, I threw up in the garden, not because I hadn't seen death before, but because I'd never felt it so close. Andrea found me there, silent, still stained with someone else's blood. I didn't look at him. "Why did you make me watch?" "Because this is the world you're in now. I didn't choose it." You did, he said, the second you chose to run with him. I turned on him then, eyes burning, fists clenched. You want me to be like you? I snapped. Cold? Numb? Willing to kill just to prove a point? His expression didn't change, but his voice did. You think I want that for you? He said, quiet and razor sharp. You think I want you to be like me? I don't. Then what do you want? He stepped forward. His fingers brushed my wrist and his voice cracked. I want you alive. That night he didn't touch me. He sat in the chair beside the bed, watching the door like a sentry while I rocked Marco to sleep. He didn't sleep, didn't speak, but I knew what he was thinking because I was thinking it too. The war had begun, and there was no going back now. They came for him again, not through the gates, not with bombs or guns or threats etched into car doors. This time, they came through me. It happened in seconds. One blink, one breath, one heartbeat too slow. I was walking with Marco through the East Wing garden, walled, locked, guarded. Andrea had insisted it was the safest part of the estate during construction on the upper floor. 2 guards trailed us at a polite distance. Marco was laughing, clutching a blue toy car in his fist and babbling like he didn't know the world wanted to steal him. Then I turned the corner and saw the gardener. Except he wasn't. His hands were clean, his eyes were wrong. And the second I screamed, the world exploded. Gunshots, shouting, Marco crying. I ran, held him against me and ran through the hedges, thorns ripping my skin, my boots slipping in the mud. I didn't stop. Not when bullets split leaves beside my head. Not when someone shouted, take the mother. I kept running, because if they got me, they got him. The guard caught up first, fell beside me in a pool of blood after taking a bullet meant for Marco. I screamed. Another grabbed me, dragged me behind a stone column, while the firefight lit the garden like a storm made of flame. Marco was still screaming, so was I. I didn't see Andrea. Not until the world stilled and the last man hit the ground. He appeared like a shadow ripping through the mist, gun raised, expression carved from murder. When his eyes landed on me, everything in him cracked. He didn't speak, didn't ask. He just dropped to his knees in front of me and pulled Marco from my arms with shaking hands, checked his face, his limbs, ran his palms down the baby's body like he couldn't believe he was real. Then he looked at me, and his voice broke. You're bleeding. It was true. I hadn't noticed. Cuts on my arms, a graze on my cheek, my sweater torn, but I didn't care. I just whispered, we're okay, and watched his hands curl into fists around his son. He gave Marco to the guard behind him without a word, then stood and turned toward the bodies. One was still breathing, gasping, gurgling, crawling. Andrea walked to him, no rage, no noise, just cold purpose. He raised his gun and fired, once, twice, a third time, for silence. And when he turned back to me, his shirt was soaked in blood that wasn't his. He didn't speak until we were inside. He didn't even look at me until Marco was safe, fed, and asleep in a new room reinforced with enough steel to hold back a war. Then he found me in the shower. I was sitting on the floor, fully clothed, letting the hot water pound my back like it could erase what happened. He knelt beside me, silent. I didn't cry. Not until he touched my shoulder. Then I broke. He held me like I was glass, washed the dirt and blood from my skin with his bare hands, wrapped me in a towel and carried me to bed like I weighed nothing. I let him. Not because I was weak, but because I couldn't hold myself together anymore. And he didn't ask me to. We lay there in silence until I whispered the one thing I wasn't supposed to feel. I was scared. I know. I didn't care what they did to me, I breathed, but I couldn't if they'd hurt him. They didn't. But if they had, his voice cut through mine, low and final. They didn't. I turned my face into his chest. I've never been that afraid in my life. He didn't respond. Not with words, but his arms tightened around me until I breathed, like he was trying to anchor me to the earth. I thought he'd fall asleep beside me. But when I woke a few hours later, the bed was cold. The hall was empty, and the air tasted like something had broken. I found him in the basement. The blood still hadn't dried on his hands. 3 bodies lay on the floor in black bags, half unzipped. Santori symbols carved into their chests. Andrea was silent, just staring. Luca stood beside him. Boss, he said quietly, we traced the route. They paid off one of our supply drivers, slipped in through the greenhouse. Andrea's jaw clenched. Show me. Now? No, in 30 minutes. I'm going to hold my son first. When he walked past me, he paused, stopped, then looked down at his hands. I almost lost you. I swallowed hard. But you didn't. He met my eyes, and I saw something I wasn't ready for. Not love, not obsession, but something far more dangerous. Need. I killed 3 men today, he said softly. And I'd do it again. I'd do worse. I know. And if they'd touched you. His throat worked. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to, because I'd already seen what he became when the people he loved were threatened. I don't want to be the reason you become this, I whispered. You're not, he said. You're the reason I'm still only this. He stepped closer. His voice dropped. If anything ever happens to you, it won't. Don't say that. He touched my cheek. Blood still dried on his wrist. Because if it does, he whispered, I'll become something the world can't survive. We didn't touch that night, didn't kiss, didn't need to, because something far more intimate passed between us. The knowledge that we wouldn't survive losing each other. Not just him, me too. And I realized this wasn't just a war for an heir. This was a war for everything we had left, and if we didn't win, there'd be no one left to mourn us. The next morning he left a dress on the bed. Midnight blue, simple, elegant, lined with soft velvet, the kind that whispered across skin like a secret. I stared at it for a long time, not because I didn't know what it meant, but because I did. He was about to make a move, and he wanted the world to see me when he did. The house was too quiet, not tense, not dangerous, just quiet. Like something was about to shift and everyone knew it except me. Marco was already dressed when I entered the nursery. One of the women, Lucia, the only one Andrea trusted with him besides me, smiled gently and placed a kiss on his head. He's ready, she said. They're waiting. They? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. I followed the guards down to the west wing, the part of the estate I hadn't seen yet. It wasn't marble and glass like the rest. This was darker, older, wood-paneled walls, deep rugs, family portraits that stared down at me like I was a stranger who didn't belong. And maybe I was. But I kept walking, because whatever Andrea was about to do, I needed to see it. The room was full when I arrived, men in tailored suits, weapons at their hips, women beside them, silent, polished, purposeful. Andrea stood at the head of the long table, shoulders squared, sleeves rolled, jaw set. He looked like a storm, and every person in that room knew it. When his eyes found me, the noise dimmed. No one spoke, no one moved. He didn't smile, didn't soften, but something in his gaze shifted, acknowledged me, pulled me in. Sit, he said. He didn't say beside me, he didn't say stay quiet. He said sit, like I belonged at his table. Like I had a voice in the kingdom he ruled with blood. I sat, every pair of eyes followed me. Some curious, some cautious, some resentful. I didn't care, because Marco was safe, Andrea was alive, and I had earned this seat. Even if I didn't know what it cost yet. I called you here, Andrea began, voice even, because this war is no longer a matter of territory. It's personal. Heads nodded, eyes sharpened. Andrea placed a photograph on the table, one I didn't recognize, then another, and another, names I'd never heard, faces I'd never seen. He looked up. This is who betrayed us, who funded the Santori, who marked my son for death. Silence, then murmurs, then a voice, older, Italian, skeptical. And the woman? Every eye turned to me. Andrea didn't hesitate. She stays. She's the mother, the man said. Not the wife. That child is legitimate, yes, but her place is by my side, Andrea cut in, not loud, but final, like steel being sheathed. No one argued after that. When the meeting ended, the room emptied fast, except for him and me. We stood in the silence until he crossed the distance between us. You didn't run. I looked up at him. Was I supposed to? He studied me, then softly, most would have. Then I'm not most. No, he said, you're not. We walked in silence to the upstairs balcony. The sky was gray, thick with the promise of more rain. Below us, men loaded crates into trucks, weapons, supplies, bodies maybe. I didn't ask. Andrea stood beside me, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the horizon like he was already preparing for the next battle. You've changed, he said suddenly. I'm surviving. He glanced at me. No, you're leading. That word landed hard. I'm not leading anything, I said. This isn't my empire. It could be. I shook my head. I'm not a queen. He turned to me, stepped in close. No, he murmured. You're something worse. My breath caught. Worse? You make kings bleed. He leaned in, not to kiss me, just to speak. Soft, dark, intentional. I've ruled this world without love, without softness, without anything I couldn't afford to lose. His hand brushed mine, and then you walked in. A stranger. A thief. I'm not sorry, I whispered. Good. His eyes locked on mine. Because I'm not letting you go. We didn't kiss. Not then. Not there. But I felt the promise of it burning between us. And it terrified me. Because I wasn't sure I could survive him. But I was even less sure I could survive without him. That night, he offered me something I didn't expect. Not power. Not protection. Freedom. He stood in my doorway after Marco had fallen asleep. Silent. Hands at his sides. I need you to know something, he said. I sat up. What? You can leave. The words knocked the air from my chest. What? If you walk out those doors, he continued, you'll be safe. I'll make sure of it. No one will follow. No one will question. I'll move heaven and hell to protect you. But, he stepped closer, you stay because you choose me, not because I kept you. I stared at him, stunned, then whispered, why now? Because if you choose to stay, he said, voice low, I need to know it's real. I stood, crossed the room, placed my hand over his heart, felt it racing beneath my palm. I haven't run yet, I said. His hand covered mine. I know. And I'm tired of surviving. His voice cracked. Then stay. I nodded. I will. He didn't smile, didn't move, just leaned in and kissed my forehead like a promise. And for the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't a thief, or a fugitive, or a nurse who made a terrible mistake. I felt like I was someone worth choosing. The morning was quiet. For once, not the kind of quiet that felt like a warning, but real quiet, peaceful. Like the house had finally taken a breath and decided to keep it. Marco was asleep in the sunlight, curled on a blanket in the garden, a half-chewed teething ring resting by his shoulder. I sat a few feet away, watching his chest rise and fall, my fingers tangled in the grass beneath me, like it might hold me here longer if I clung tight enough. Andrea stood at the window above, watching us. I didn't have to look to know. He watched like that every day now. Less like a man guarding his territory. More like someone afraid to blink in case the dream slipped through his hands. When he finally came outside, he didn't speak. Just walked to me. Sat down beside me in his slacks and dress shoes like he had nowhere else to be. Like being here, with us, was the only thing that mattered anymore. And maybe it was. I thought the house would feel different after all this, I said quietly. He looked at me. How? Louder, angrier, hollow. He didn't answer, just reached for my hand and held it against his thigh, warm and strong. It's never felt like this, he said. Like what? Like home. I looked at him. The monster I ran from, the father I never meant to steal from, the man who should have hated me, and instead chose me, over revenge, over war, over pride. He chose us. You could have let me go, I whispered. I could have. You gave me the choice. Yes, I turned toward him. Then here's mine. His brow lifted. I'm not leaving. His fingers tightened around mine. I know. We didn't say I love you. We didn't need to. That wasn't how this worked, not between us. Not after everything. We chose each other in blood, in silence, in war. That was stronger than any vow. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, slipped it into my hand. What is this? Proof. I opened it. My name, Marco's name, his. All tied together, on paper, in ink, in law. You're not a secret anymore, he said. Not to me. Not to them. Tears stung my eyes. I blinked them away. You did this without asking. You would have said no. You don't know that. I know you, he said. You don't need crowns or contracts. He touched my cheek. But I need the world to know who you are. We sat in silence for a while, listening to Marco's soft breathing, to birds somewhere in the trees, to the kind of stillness that only comes after the storm finally breaks. And then he said the words I didn't realize I'd been waiting for. You're his mother, but you're more than that. I turned toward him. I want you beside me. You already have me. He shook his head. I want the world to see it. I should have felt fear, but I didn't. Not anymore, because I had already stood in the fire and survived. Because he had already shown me the kind of loyalty people bleed for. Because this was no longer about a child I saved in the dark. This was about us, a family carved from ruin, a king who never stepped down, and a woman who never asked him to. That night, he didn't take me to bed like a man claiming his prize. He undressed me slowly, tasted every scar, held me through every breath, whispered thank you against my skin like a man who finally understood what love could cost, and chose it anyway. Afterward, we lay tangled in the sheets, Marco asleep in the next room, the future stretching ahead of us like something we could finally shape, not through force, not through fear, but through choice. He looked at me, eyes soft in the dark. "What happens now?" I asked. He smiled. "The real kind. The world bends," he said, "or it breaks. And us?" He leaned in, brushed his mouth over mine. "We bend it." The next morning I stood at the balcony with Marco in my arms and watched Andrea address the men outside. No blood, no threat, just presence. He didn't need to scream, didn't need to command. He was the command. And when he reached for my hand before stepping down to them, the message was clear. This is the woman who saved my son. This is the woman who stayed. This is the woman I chose. Some of them nodded, some didn't, but none of them looked away, because they understood what it meant when a man like Andrea Marcarelli stepped into the light and brought someone with him. He wasn't hiding anymore. Neither were we. Later that night, I found him in the nursery, rocking Marco, humming something soft and low. He looked up when I entered. "He's getting heavier," he murmured. "He's growing." Andrea nodded, then looked down at the child in his arms. "Our son." The words hit me harder than I expected, not because they weren't true, but because I'd been holding them alone for so long, I forgot what it would feel like to finally hear them from him. "Our son," I repeated, softer. He stood, placed Marco gently in the crib, then turned to me, wrapped his arms around my waist, and said the thing I would never forget. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." And I believed him, because monsters don't get happy endings. But men who choose to fight for them, they do. And I had one. In this house, in his arms, in our son's sleepy smile, we were never meant to be safe. We were made to survive, to protect, to fight, but for once we weren't doing it alone. We were doing it together, and that was everything. He was never supposed to choose me. I was never supposed to stay. But in the end, the devil didn't take my soul. He gave me his name. If you felt that, if it pulled you under, Book 2 is waiting. What happens next will leave you pissed, and he'll burn the world. Subscribe now and hit that notification button. You don't want to miss what's next. Thank you for listening. See you in the next book, where my story take a major turn that will test me to my limits.